This
Meeting
conference will now be
order.
recorded.
I just have a couple of quick announcements. So I did get a request to add back the short visitors section at the end of the meeting before council concerns. I don't exactly remember. We might have done it after council concerns, either spot, if someone recalls that.
I believe it was always before.
Before, thank you. 3-minute visitors feedback. For me, the purpose is mostly to give us feedback on just the meeting, the previous meeting that they've listened to. But if there's a consensus with the council, could we add that back in this evening?
Are we going to make it specific to the meeting that we just had?
I would appreciate it if those comments were limited, because there is a regular visitor section where.
Okay, then I'm all for it.
Sure. I concur.
Okay. And I do want to say, I think Dan also brought that up at a recent meeting that we had. So thank you for that. So I do see head nods and concurrence there. And then also for the regular visitors section, if people will email me at mayorcockrum@cityofgearhart.com. I've got my phone here, so I'll take a look at that. And I do see that I've got one email that just came in. I haven't read it, but I do see that we have one visitor that wants to speak. So the first order of business then is to appoint a council president going forward for the next 2 years. And that can be done by a motion.
I move that Carrie Smith be council president.
I second that. He's done a great job so far.
Thank you.
Okay, so there is a motion by Rita and a second by Brent for Carrie Smith to be council president for the next 2 years. Any further discussion? Hearing none, then all those in favor say aye.
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 And
Peter?
those opposed?
Peter, do I vote or do I abstain from myself?
You're actually able to vote for yourself if you'd like, because
Okay,
there's
well,
no financial remuneration associated with being the council president, so there's no conflict of interest.
Okay.
Did you vote then?
Yes, I did. I just wanted to make sure I wasn't overstepping the line.
Okay, I think that was unanimous, but those opposed say no. And hearing none, the motion passes. Congratulations, Carrie.
Thank you, council.
And
Councilors.
next, then we have a declaration of any conflict of interest.
I have none.
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 Moving right along, approval of the minutes for the special meeting from December 22nd. Do I hear a motion?
I move to approve the minutes as submitted.
I second the motion.
I do see one typo. On no correspondence was received prior to or during the meeting. Instead of our, it should be or.
Thank you.
So there's a motion and a second and one typo. Hopefully can be corrected. All those in favor say aye.
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 And those opposed, oh, and aye.
I would like to abstain.
Thank you, Dan. And those opposed? None. So the minutes are approved with one typo correction, 4 voting yes and 1 abstaining. The Planning Commission report, there was none. The Planning Commission did not meet. And wow, we're already to the mayor's report. I will try and make this brief. The rules of the council final document was in the packet. And if you all would sign the acknowledgement at your leisure and get the acknowledgement down to City Hall, we'll get it in a file and have that, you have the document to refer to. And we did talk for a moment before the meeting officially started that we will share this with the Planning Commission as well. And hopefully they will find that helpful. A couple things. I have worked on a mayor's report to be put on the blog in the next day or two. I just have a couple more things I want to add to it. But just to kind of recap, in case anybody's forgotten some of the things that we worked on this last month, we did have the work session and went over the Oregon Solutions Project for an elk management plan. We had a work session with Q&A. Ultimately, we would like to get an agreement of cooperation signed by February or March. We will likely have a town hall. It's been suggested a couple of times to me. I've actually started a PowerPoint from what I learned at the work session, and so I'll be sharing that with y'all as we move along. COVID-19 vaccines, I'm happy to announce that y'all probably know we have some in the county. Our first responders have received their vaccines. They were certainly offered to all of the volunteer firemen and as well as our police officers. So they have been vaccinated this last weekend. Some did decline, but maybe over time they will pick that up. We have several nurses several retired nurses, myself is one of them, who are volunteers for the county. And so I think the county is working on their plan for distribution as doses come into the county and how they will get those distributed. And when I put out the blog report, there will be a link to the county's website that describes the tiers of how the dosing for the COVID vaccine is going to be given out. No action has been taken on the personnel policies this month with Chad out of the office. I've just had those on my desk. CERT meeting also paused in December and January, and well, they hope to meet later in this month. The natural hazard mitigation plan, we all reviewed that at our work session as well. Carol followed up some of our comments that were made to Tiffany, and then also we'll be following that up with the Planning Commission, just as part of a way of having some public involvement into that portion, the Gerhardt portion, if you will, of the countywide document. We also have a Highway 101 safety project that's just getting started, and today we're working on finding community members, primarily business owners and people who happen to live on Highway 101 for a stakeholder advisory committee. So this project is just getting underway. It's a planning project for bringing to fruition one of the concepts that is in the Gerhardt Transportation Plan, specifically with regard to Highway 101 and a lot of the safety problems that we have with difficulty crossing the highway, particularly where there's 4 lanes, and just the 4 lanes in itself. Dan has agreed to be on this stakeholder advisory committee and can hopefully keep us in the loop as that moves along. And Carol, you're a part of the committee as well. And would you have anything to add to that right now? Carol?
Just to emphasize that it's a planning document, so if anybody asks you when is the work going to start, we're pretty far away from that. It has everything to do with lane configurations, sidewalks in some places, bicycle lane widening and crossings and safety, drainage. And yeah, it's about a year process, and then so we get the plan in place, and of course that will come for your adoption, and then we will hopefully get it in the STIP, the State Transportation Improvement Plan, which gets it scheduled. So there's no known time when this will happen, just the planning. So the planning is important because we want to get the design right.
And the funding for the actual project is really kind of separate and has not been done at this point in time.
That's right. This, just the planning is $325,000 plan that ODOT is doing.
Right. And finally, the last thing I have is the fire station due diligence report. And so on Matt Brown's last day as mayor, he did a draft of the due diligence report for the High Point location. That report is about 80% done. It still has some calculations and some other data that need to be added to it before it's ready to be distributed or discussed or brought forward for the public. So we will be working on getting that completed, I would say in the next month, but I don't have a firm time frame on that right now. But definitely we're working on it. So just to put that out there. That's all I have. Councilor reports. Councilor Warren.
Well, had a nice time with the CARES Act check application process and check distribution process. Met a lot of nice business folks. They were very appreciative of the personal delivery of the applications and the personal delivery of receiving the checks. Interestingly, we did have one of our 24 applications that we received and cut checks for. One business owner refused the check and they changed their mind, so kept that check back and we voided the check. But other than that, it went off without a hitch.
Mm-hmm.
That's about all I have to report.
Thank you. Councilor Jesse.
I have nothing.
Councilor Rita.
Well, I also enjoyed giving out the CARES Act funds. I really think it was a nice way for the counselors to get out in the public where they wouldn't usually get. So that's one thing. And the other thing that I have, which you will talk about later, Mayor, is that I was able to meet with Mayor Paulina and Mr. Maury today to get a tour of the grade school and to find out some things and some plans that he has for the future. And while Paulina will go into that in detail, I really enjoyed myself. That's it for me.
And Counselor Carey.
Well, I also went around and delivered applications and checks, and it was interesting to see the response on people's face when you said you had an application, and then when you gave them a check, it was, I didn't realize, well, I'm not in business, so they were very happy to get the check. I can say that. I even saw tears in one woman's eyes.
Yeah.
I also met with Scopy Enterprises and the school and did a walk around and listened to a lot of the ideas that they're thinking about, and it was very interesting. And that's about all I have.
All right, thank you all very much. We have city officer reports. The chief of police, I know they had their routine reports were blogged out, I believe, but Chief Bowman did a special report. I wanted him to give us a feel for some of the patterns, some of the trends that he's seeing. And so that was in the packet. The fire chief report, any comments on that at all?
It was enlightening to read the chief's 2 different documents he gave us, and I appreciate him. I appreciate his perspective on that, and thank him for giving that to us.
Paulina, is this something that he could give out quarterly? Because I enjoyed it as well.
Yes, he is going to.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
The treasurer's report, we got our statements. Are there any comments on that?
No.
None?
Nope.
Okay, and Peter, city attorney? You're muted.
Okay. We got a second amended complaint related to US Bank and the Shannon Smith property. Again, one of the most unique situations I've seen. The mortgage is recorded against 1/2 interest in the property, not recorded on the other. They're arguing that was done in error, and they want quiet title. The way that I look at the statute, to correct an error, I believe it had to have been brought within 10 years, so 2017. So I think there might be a laches argument that would apply. But again, the main reason to record interest against property isn't just to record your interest. It's also to give everyone else that later might record a lien the knowledge to determine whether they want to record a lien against the property or not. So that is frankly our primary argument, is that our lien was recorded before US Bank attempted to record a lien, and thus is prior in time, prior right. So it'll be really interesting to see what a judge does with this. It's just it's just facts that would never occur today, but things were, I think back in 2007, no one thought you could lose money on real estate, so maybe they weren't checking all the boxes at that point. So anyway, that was exciting. We got that filed last week, and we'll have to see what the court does with it.
Anything else? Thank you.
We had some questions come up regarding the fence permit for the elementary school. I think there's some concern there that someone might either illegally park or camp there, and just they had an interest in providing a little bit more security to the property. And we were able to kind of bring everyone together and talk through those issues. And I think that went out last week, and hopefully it's my understanding from talking to their attorney is that they wanted to put it up immediately due to some safety concerns. So there might already be a fence up.
Right, I believe he's putting it up next week. City administrator report, Chad is still on his leave of absence. Christy, would you have anything that you would want to speak to?
Nothing that none of you have already mentioned. I will tell you that the park survey, I did check the count right before the meeting. We're at a total of 119, 20 are paper, 99 electronic.
Oh, good.
Christy, thank you so much for mentioning that, because I've got it in my my typed up blog post, but I didn't have it on my notes. So thank you for sharing that.
No problem.
And it's great to hear over 100 electronic responses already for that. And that's going to be great data to have for the Parks Committee. Next on our agenda is correspondence. And so I just want to chat for a minute on the first letter, which is the tree corner on 5th and Concession. And to Robin Keller, that email somehow got lost in the period of time where we were moving our mailboxes right after the December 2nd meeting. I'm not sure how that happened, but we became aware of it just about a week ago, and that's why we decided to put it in the packet. Since that time, I have talked with Mr. McFadden in Public Works. He is gonna have an arborist take a look at the tree. It is indeed leaning somewhat, probably has been leaning for a long time, but it is a little bit top heavy in his opinion. And so we will be looking at that in the coming days. Any other comments on that by any of the council? And then the other correspondence with regard to the Navy Beach survey that we got from Tiffany Brown. I did get an email. Someone had read it in the community and did notice that they were talking about clam digging in the summertime, which I think is when you don't clam. But short of that, when I spoke with Tiffany and said, bottom line, is it a good landing place? And she said, yeah. And I go, how do you know? From reading that report? And she said, if it wasn't, we wouldn't have gotten a report at all. So anything else on correspondence? Moving on then, visitor section. Let me look on my phone. Whoop. Okay. Jack or Kathy Zimmerman. I guess I'll read this. I see they're on the call. It says, due to our experience with an erratic virtual feed, please accept the following questions for the public record and above captioned public discussion. Thank you. So, Jack or Kathy, do you want to go through these questions? I'm not seeing them unmuting. This says, please provide progress update regarding the city's request for validation order regarding the proposed High Point property. Peter, can you take that?
Yeah, we put that on, we paused that while we're getting a little bit more data. There's some data we need to get. I think that the mayor mentioned Mayor Brown's draft report earlier, and then there's some other information that we're hoping to receive that could provide us with information related to the viability. So once we have that information, I think that council will be better able to make an informed decision. May potentially go back out to the public as well and get some more public comment regarding options and some feedback along those lines.
Thank you. Okay, this next point that that they sent, has Palisades HOA engaged legal counsel to defend against the city's validation efforts? If so, has such legal counsel requested discovery information from the city, and what information is being requested?
We've been contacted by legal counsel, actually two separate legal counsels, requesting information related to the fire house. One of those was an attorney representing the Palisades Homeowners Association. That was done via a public records request, not a subpoena or other court-related document. The good news about our fire information is virtually all of it is on the city's website. It is actually several thousand pages of documents. It is all posted on the website. One of the lawyers did ask for some follow-up information regarding where the volunteers live. And that is actually exempt. We don't for first responders, their addresses are exempt. So we don't, the city itself, we don't have that. I don't have that document. I mean, there's no document that lists all that. So I had, before Chad left, I had asked him, just generally speaking, you know, are the volunteers in Gearhart or are they in other areas? And I had not gotten an answer on that. I suspect I'll probably get an answer upon his return. So that's what I can tell you about those two public records requests.
There are 4 points here in this email. The third one is, has the city formally completed determining the titled ownership of the easement underlying the proposed High Point location? And if so, who owns the easement?
That's a really interesting question. And the short answer is yes. We have looked at it. It is a pipe entity that is actually part of the HOA that was administratively dissolved by the state of Oregon. So what what there is basically a road easement across the property. It's not constructed. There's no road. It's just an easement. And like we've done previously, if we wanted to, if we owned the parcels on either side, then we could vacate that easement. The one complication associated with that is that the road easement is the entire road throughout the HOA. So we would not be looking to vacate all of it. We would just be looking to vacate that portion that is on the property if in fact we were to decide to move forward with that.
And
So we would
finally,
need to bring in a surveyor, I guess.
the city has the city issued an approved fence permit for fencing around the old elementary school? And I think I can answer that. I did sign a fence permit last week. The fence is scheduled to be going in next week. It's primarily a fence across the Pacific Way side. And there's already some fencing on the north side. And yeah, that's primarily the fencing. I would say primarily across the Pacific Way side to keep vehicles out of the area. So we don't usually have Q&A for our visitor section, but we did tonight. And Tom Thies has a thank you note here for the 3 minutes at the end. But Tom, do you want to have the floor right now?
No, not really. I've always thought that was a good idea to have because something might be brought up, during the meeting. And it's nice to have that at the end. So, oh, by the way, Tom Thies, 292 Woodland Avenue, Gerhard, Oregon. For any of you who don't know. That's all.
Okay, and just for the record, Kathy and Jack Zimmerman are 408 West Herschel Circle in Gerhard, and I think he said he's having trouble with the mic, but thank you for the answers. And that's all the correspondence that I have on my phone at this time. So we're going to move on to ordinances and resolutions. I gotta find that. So ordinarily staff would read the synopsis. So I think I'm going to just go ahead and do that. The subject is ordinance number 929, C1 text amendments, C1 zone text amendments. City of Gerhard Planning Commission is proposing changes to the city's comp plan, C1 zone text. After multiple meetings and revisions, the City Council held their public hearing on November 19th to collect further feedback. At the December council meeting, council discussed further amendment of neighborhood cafe language and tabled the issue to the following month. The attached ordinance 929 is the final draft collaborative effort amongst the commissioners, councilors, and community members. Council's options: read once by title only, read twice by title only, declaring an emergency, do nothing, or the council may make a motion to approve as amended should discussion result in proposed changes. The staff recommendation is to move to approve ordinance 929, reading once by title only, with or without amended language. Legal analysis Gerhart Charter ordinances may be read once by title only in 2 separate meetings. The ordinance takes effect 30 days later. There is no financial analysis attached to this. And that was done by Christy for chat. Do I hear a motion to open discussion or a motion as outlined?
Well, I'll make a motion to open discussion.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Dan. Does someone want to speak on the issue?
I have an opinion that I would like to express, and I understand the need to bring some of the businesses in line, and that's one of the purposes of this C1 zone amendment. But I do take issue with in Exhibit A, page 2, paragraph 1, neighborhood cafe. I would like to have the service may include alcohol sales on premise or to go where licensed by OLCC. Change to read as it reads for the, excuse me, I got to change the page. The neighborhood grocery market and put in may offer beer, may offer wine tasting and limit to on-premises beer and wine consumption where appropriate, subject to OLCC licensing.
Carrie, can you just read the text for page 2 neighborhood cafe? Can you read it specifically how you would like to see it?
Okay, a neighborhood cafe, except for formula use as defined herein, business devoted primarily to the serving of prepared food where food is consumed while customers are seated at tables and having no more than 1,300 square feet of seating area. Food and beverage may also be sold for takeout. Service may include beer and wine consumption where appropriate, subject to OLCC licensing. I'm sorry, I got to flip back. Outdoor on-site seating is unlimited. Public sidewalk seating is permitted in accordance with safety and ADA requirements. That's how I'd like that paragraph to read.
So you're deleting alcohol sales and inserting limited beer and wine consumption or beer and wine consumption where appropriate,
Beer and wine consumption.
subject to licensing by OLCC.
Yes, ma'am.
And what about the on-premise or to-go?
I do. I don't have a problem with the on-premise or to go with the beer or wine. I just do not want to see people walking outside with a cocktail to go cup or I do not want alcohol, hard liquors sold in our C1 zone because that is a C2. That's a C2 zone. It's allowed in C2 and it's not supposed to be in C1. So I do not would not want that to be changed.
I am curious why you believe it could not or should not be part of C1. I don't understand the history or the. I guess the difference between ordering a Manhattan or a glass of wine to me makes no difference. It's an alcoholic beverage that relatively has the same volume of alcohol by the whatever glass you're purchasing it in. Can you enlighten me?
The history is, Dan, we've never had a hard liquor establishment in downtown Gerhardt, and I am just opposed to having one starting now in the time of COVID. There's no business that's going to be benefiting from this addition. You've heard from the sweet shop owner that she has a neighborhood cafe license, but she is not interested in it. And I've talked to John Allen, and he has said that 30 years ago he could have gotten a hard liquor license, and he had no interest in bringing hard liquor in downtown Gerhardt. It's just not something that would be appropriate when you have kids and families walking the streets and going in and out. So it's just a history of not having a bar. And
So I'm just going to jump in here. Dan's Paul dropped.
Mhm.
And so I assume that he's going to be trying to get back on. So Carrie, he probably did not hear the last bit of what you had to say. I do see another caller coming back on, so that may be
Sorry,
Dave.
sorry that was me.
Okay, got it.
And unfortunately, I lost, and this is my own fault, but I lost Carrie right in the middle of this discussion.
Right.
I guess, this is what we're here to debate. I personally see no difference between a martini and a glass of wine. And so whether or not a particular vendor or business wants to use the provision doesn't, in my mind, mean that they shouldn't be allowed to have the provision if they so chose. And so that's my opinion.
Rita, do you have any comment?
Well, I do, but I feel kind of bad because it's kind of late in the game for me to even bring this up. My only concern about this draft, which so many people have worked on, is the limit of residential space to the total floor space of the store. I just don't think it should even be in there. I don't, because if somebody has a store and they want to build an apartment right above it, limiting the residential space to 50% doesn't make any sense to me. But like I said, I'm mentioning this really late in the game, but if you ask if I have any concerns, that's just a concern. Other than that, I'm fine.
Okay.
Rita, I think what the intent behind that is 50% of the total square footage. So if they built a second floor and the residential portion was 100% of the second floor, that is 50% of the total.
Okay.
So
that makes more sense.
That's how I believe the planning commission interpreted as well, is that they said that you should be able to do a live work where you lived on the second floor and worked on the first, and that was their intent.
And that language mirrors a lot of banking finance rules regarding work, live, loft, retail, live space. So
all right,
I think it's fine the way
that
it
makes
is.
a lot more sense to me. Thank you.
Back on alcohol versus beer and wine, I'm kind of torn because I agree with Dan that it really makes no difference whether you're taking your alcohol in the form of wine, beer, gin and tonic, whatever you want. You're gonna drink what you want to drink. But I also hear Carrie saying that it's just, there's something perceptual about the difference, that hard liquor has a more nefarious history to it. And maybe that's worth keeping out of downtown. But I don't feel that strongly that, like Carrie does, about that. Perceptions are important for some things, but this wouldn't be the hill that I'd want to die on.
I want to just talk a little bit about, I've been doing some research on Gerhardt history. I ran on the notion that traditional Gerhardt values are something that should be valued. And so back in 1978, a woman named Bunny Dorr, I'm not sure what she did, but I think she did a column or worked for the Seaside Signal, among other things. She wrote for the Gerhardt Historical Commission a paper I've got in my hand. It's called No Claim to Fame, Gerhardt, Oregon. And the purpose of this paper was to go along with meeting the LCDC goals for the writing of the comp plan, which followed very soon after she had written this paper. And so on page 5 of this document, I'll just read the paragraph because what I think about the comp plan is that there are differences between the C1 zone and the C2 zone. And I think they're there for a reason. And maybe this sheds some light on it. At length, in the early 1900s, some hardy souls decided, in spite of advice to the contrary, that a house built out on the foredune would not inevitably blow away in the winter storms, and oceanfront area became the quote unquote place to build. The sand dune crest from Avenue G to Pacific Way on Ocean Avenue and Pacific Way to 10th on Marion Avenue became locally known as, in quotes, Gin Ridge. This may, although research provides no definitive answer, have originated from the popularity of the dry martini and the Gerhardt habit of home gatherings, otherwise known as a cocktail party, as the preferred form of informal social life. And then it goes on to talk about when those homes were built, 1906 to 1926. And so that quote really stuck with me, that is a reason, I think, not to potentially allow hard liquor sales in downtown. Because I think of the downtown as a place where, you know, back in the 50s and 60s and 70s and 80s, maybe even the 90s, kids would ride down there on their bike, get their candy, their penny candy, that sort of thing, and just have that family bit of no worry when you send your kids down there. And somehow it's just hard for me to be on board with the hard liquor alcohol. And I guess this is just my piece of history that makes me think about that. Any other comments or?
I'm not sure how to word this exactly, so I probably will blunder it. But as a person that's worked in so many of the homes on Gin Ridge, the liquor cabinet is plentiful. The wine cabinet or wine storage not visibly as much. funny. I would take, from my point of view, I would take the opposite approach. As there's a reason it's called Gin Ridge, because drinking hard alcohol is kind of the norm in that, you know, the tradition, if you will. I don't know. The idea of controlling something like this just really seems counterintuitive to society's wants and wishes. But obviously, it's 3 votes out of 5. So I think I've said my piece.
We haven't voted yet.
Well, I don't know, maybe come at it from the standpoint of one of the goals behind the revisions was to give businesses more flexibility to do what they wanted to do in order to stay in business. And if having that arrow in their quiver gives them another tool to make a buck and stay in business, if I'm sitting on the fence, I probably lean towards flexibility to the business owners rather than restricting them. Nobody's saying that they have to sell hard liquor. It's just they have the option of doing it if they want to. So,
Well, along those lines, Brent, I've got to say that John Allen has told me that he could have gotten one 30 years ago, but he didn't want one then because he didn't think it was appropriate for downtown, and he wouldn't get one now because he doesn't think it's appropriate. And Sweet Shop has said that she is not interested in getting a full service liquor license. So there are those 2 businesses that are in downtown right now that would benefit, and they have come out and granted, John has not come to the council, but I talked to him this week, and they've come out and said they're not interested in that. And what we're doing is we're bringing in line other businesses that have kind of stepped over the business line that they've gotten their permits for, and we're trying to make things right for them. But it isn't for me, it isn't a necessity to open up another door when the 2 businesses that are working right now in downtown Gerhardt have said that they don't care to have that. And if they don't care to get that kind of license, then, and my feeling is I don't want to see hard liquor in downtown. I am more driven not to have it in downtown Gerhardt. We haven't had it. I've only lived here 35 years, and we've never had hard liquor downtown, except for at the Fireman's Ball. And I don't see any reason to start now. So that's my argument. And you can tell the way I'm going to vote. So I'll leave it at that.
But my concern is just because 2 business owners downtown that currently aren't interested in doing such doesn't mean that somebody else wouldn't want to. We're not forcing anybody to choose to sell hard alcohol, but I think having the option available, personally, I don't see the problem with it.
Well, that's your opinion, Dan, and it's
But it's what we're here to debate, isn't it?
That is exactly what we're here to do.
So I'm not hearing any more discussion. Is there a motion anyone would like to make to try and get this passed with or without changes as described by Counselor Smith?
I would like to make a motion that you'll have to excuse me while I turn on a light. Make a motion to approve as amended, approve ordinance number 929 C1 text amendments.
I'll second that.
And is that to be read by title, read once by title only?
Yes.
And Carol, do you have the amendment written down as Carrie mentioned it, or do we need to repeat that?
I'd like to read it back to make sure I have it right. So we're on page 2, Neighborhood Cafe. Halfway through the paragraph description, service may include beer and wine consumption. And I think you meant is on premise or to go where appropriate, or I should say, I think it could say where licensed by OLCC.
That would work.
We have a motion.
Yeah, so we're substituting the word alcohol for beer and wine, basically.
That's correct.
Right.
Right. So we have a motion and a second to approve by reading once by title only with an amendment. Ordinance 929 C1 text amendments. Is there any more discussion?
Yes, please.
Go ahead.
I still I have heartburn with the fact that, to my knowledge, I have not heard any business owner in the C1 zone in favor of these changes. We've heard a lot of business owners that are not in favor of these changes, but I don't think, in going through the list and, you know, people that have talked and written and such, I haven't come up with one that's in favor of what we're doing. So that makes me really take pause and question, why are we doing this? Or are we getting it right would be the next place that my mind goes. So I'm very concerned.
Okay, any other comments?
I had a question for Carol. So the business owners that you've heard from, Carol, they were asked to come back to the planning committee with a list of agreed upon amendments to the proposal. Were there any of those comments that you incorporated, or were they unable to reach consensus on what they wanted changed, or how did that whole scenario play out?
On just this topic,
The C1 amendments.
I mean, are you just saying, how did we get to this language that includes alcohol as it's written now? Is that?
No, more broadly than that. Dan raised a broader issue of business owners that have voiced some objections to the changes.
Okay, well, some of the changes were made early on, and the biggest objection by the public was that you not do anything. And so short of going back and I think identifying every change that was agreed upon, or not. This is the version you have in front of you is the closest we got to agreed upon version versus doing nothing or delaying
Okay.
it.
But Carol, isn't this supposed to help bring those other businesses that are outside what their license or their business license is, to bring them more in line so they're not in violation of their business license?
Oh, yeah, of course, that's the main point. Yes, I mean, I didn't know how far back you wanted to go in terms of, and forgive me, Brent, I forgot you really weren't there.
I wasn't.
Yeah.
I'm totally ignorant.
Yeah, so, so, Counselor Smith is right, you know, it was a crafting of a kind of an unusual format of zoning where we describe the details like this in paragraph form instead of just a word like eating and drinking establishment, which you'll see in most zoning codes. Gerhard, the Planning Commission, after quite a long time, a year and a half, came full circled and then created this more descriptive style with the help of the mayor and the staff and the city council and the Planning Commission up to now, to make sure that the ones that were doing well do have a variety of things going on in their stores. And so that's why it's written the way it is, at least in terms of uses, and yet still remains really quite restrictive, like the C1 zone always has been. A narrowly defined, limited zone. As a lot of the time was spent keeping out any tourist type attractions.
And Brent, let me just say that in a prior conversation with Matt, after the business owners submitted their letter with some recommendations, and in that period of time, I spoke with Matt a number of times, and he did indicate to me, and I don't recall specifically what it was, but he did say that process, that pause for a month where they got together and sent that letter back, that there were some good suggestions that were incorporated. I don't specifically remember what they are, but that process was valuable in itself in improving the document.
The outdoor seating was one that was not mentioned, and we made that quite clearly on site, you know, allowed, as well as on the sidewalk, as long as it's ADA. And like you said, there were a few others, but you know,
There was a lot of misinformation initially about what we were trying to do. Like the kind of the prevailing narrative is that we were trying to further restrict and regulate businesses. And I'm not sure how that perception first occurred, but the goal was to do the opposite. So Carol looked at specific businesses and how they were being used. Carol, Chad, and I actually all walked the street so we could see how wide the sidewalks were, so we could see what the setbacks were, so we could kind of craft these regulations that met the comp plan requirements, which is maintains the residential character and, you know, is primarily serving the population of homeowners. I mean, I think for something like hard liquor that, you know, arguments could be made either way. I mean, someone could make the argument that hard liquor has been part of the residential character associated with the Gin Ridge area of Gerhardt. I think someone could also argue that when they put these restrictions in, that was closest to where the city was in terms of the city's vision and values, and they allowed, you know, at some point it was beer and wine was acceptable and hard liquor wasn't. So for something like that, where we're doing a, you know, legislative land use thing, as long as you as the council articulate why you're making the finding that you're making, why you believe that that's in line with the comp plan, then we're, from an appeal standpoint, in pretty good shape. It's when the record's totally silent on why something's happening or hasn't happened, and that's certainly not the case with these amendments. So we have a really robust record, I guess is the good news.
And one more thing I would reinforce, and that is the zone is surrounded by residential zoning. And the comprehensive plans clearly say over and over again the importance of not allowing uses that conflict with that adjoining zoning.
Yes, but one
Thank
can
you
make
for
the same
that.
argument about C2, about the C2 zone, which is surrounded by residential. Carol, I am curious. Have you, or do you recall any business that is in favor of us passing this, or are they either silent or against it, which is what I am hearing and believe?
The practical impact of not passing this, and whether we continue this and go back to the businesses and do another rewrite or not, I mean, that's all up to you.
Yeah.
But if we were just to end this and say we're going to go with the prior code, so my legal opinion previously was because we were going through this process that we could stay the regulations and enforcement, which is the same thing that we did, if you recall, for the short-term rentals. So we said to the short-term rental owners, you have to pay your tax for passing that. Then we're going to go through this public process in order to try and get the best possible health and safety regulations for the STRs. And during that time, even though this isn't an outright use or conditional use in the R1 zone, we're going to stay enforcement because we are taking these steps in order to amend the code. If you were tonight to just say, you know what, people didn't seem to have a problem with the old one, and there were a lot of business owners who seem to be against these changes, so let's just end this process and go with the prior code, it would be really difficult for us then to continue to stay enforcement. We do have one business owner that has made formal complaints against other business owners. So if we were to abandon this process and revert back, then from a code enforcement standpoint, it's likely that those business owners would be, I don't want to definitively say they've been cited because I certainly haven't inspected them and I don't know exactly what they're doing, but there are allegations that they are engaging in activities that would be allowed under the amended, but are not allowed under the current. So that is the one very real impact of abandoning the process. And those business owners probably don't know that that's part of the discussion for this evening. So at the very least, I would recommend staying this until next month so we can let them know that we are considering, that one option under consideration might be to just not make the amendments at all.
Well, we do have a motion to approve. We do have a motion and a second.
Right.
Just one more thing, I want to emphasize again, several residences that are there now are non-conforming, and and because they're legally non-conforming, they were there before the zoning, maybe not. But that's a good addition to the zone, is to allow residential in a C1 zone to a limited extent, so you don't lose the little bit of commercial you have there. It's just such a tiny area. You want to make sure it's not wide open residential use. And, you know, really the Planning Commission started this a couple years ago when they felt concerned about the business closures and the empty storefronts. And they were taking some responsibility for the zoning possibly being part of the problem. I don't really know if that's true, but there were good reasons to do it, and we have along the way tried to craft something in a slow motion, really, that fits Gearhart and fits the comp plan, and does legalize, I guess the word is, some existing uses that we get complaints about not fining people and not enforcing.
Well, based on what I've heard here and a couple of other places, Carol, I just commend you and the Planning Commission for doing a long, slow, deliberate process and listening, be willing to be flexible and bring people into conformance. So with that, can we vote on Carrie's amended version with replacing alcohol with wine and beer? I don't think not doing anything is an option. We should put it to bed.
I hear someone calling the question, so all those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed?
Nay.
So we had, the motion passes, 4 voted yes and 1 voted no. Help me out. What do we need to read by title?
We would read it by one title only, and the reason I know that's the right answer is because it was a unanimous vote, so we don't have the option of reading it twice and declaring an emergency.
Because it was not unanimous?
Right, so we would not be able to use the emergency anyway. So
Okay.
it's just once by title, and then it'll come back next month for another vote, and then reading it by title.
Okay, so I've got that page up now. So it's ordinance number 929, an ordinance amending the City of Gearhart zoning ordinance. Sorry, start over. An ordinance amending the City of Gearhart zoning ordinance, section 3.4 C1 neighborhood commercial zone. Anything else on that we need to do tonight? All right. Old business discussion, Gearhart grade school update. So we've talked about most of the updates. I think a fence permit was given out. There is possibly some review that will be done by the Corps of Engineers in the future with regard to the easternmost side of the fencing on Pacific Way. But short of that, it has been signed off. And I did do a walkthrough with Rita, with Mr. Morey today. And Carrie and Rita, if you guys want to just describe a little bit about what you learned or what you heard, I think that would be our update for now.
Well, I'll let Carrie go first. Go, Carrie.
Miss Bob was talking about turning the classrooms into studio apartments for 55 or older, splitting them and making 2 out of each one, and making cluster quads, I guess, or how to explain it. A little courtyard with small houses all the way around it, on the back side, on the west side of the building, and on the north side, and hopefully leaving the green field on the east side open. Of course, all his plans are tentative until he gets an idea what the septic is going to be for, I mean, that's a lot of bathrooms and that's got to be a big drain field. And then all the houses have drain fields, but they're just in the idea stage right now. They don't have any firm plans except for putting up the fence right now for security reasons.
Well, I was really impressed. He wants to keep the cafeteria as perhaps available for large meetings from the city and other reasons. He wants to keep the gym. It's really big. Well, it's a gym. It has some issues, and he knows it's going to take a lot of upkeep. As far as the library, which of course I was interested in, he really wants to see a volunteer community library go in there. And the whole eastern part of the property would be deeded over to the city for community park purposes. So he's really thinking about community uses, which I really like. And I was impressed. I finally saw the reason that he wants to fence everything off for now, for security reasons and for lawsuits that could incur for all sorts of reasons. So I was quite impressed with his vision. That's it.
I would just add a couple other things. He is considering very strongly putting up a couple of, remodeling two of the existing, I think it's two, might be one of the existing buildings on the Pacific Way side, one of the portables, into caretaker cottages. And that would be on a shorter time frame. And his vision that Rita and Carrie described obviously would require a zoning change, and his timeline on that was years, a couple years to 3 years down the road. So I don't expect, unless things change down the road, that that the ball fields will really be available for dog walkers or kids to play in for a couple of years, is what it sounds like at this time. I think that about all covers what I was hearing as well on our walkthrough.
Did he explain why he didn't put a fence along the parking lot from Pacific Way through to the housing development and back, and segregate off the buildings from the playground field?
Well, he did talk to that point, but what he said to me was because there was the issue with the fence permit at the very last minute, one of the things he was going to do was take the fence down the middle of the parking area so there'd be parking for people that wanted to use the green area, and then he'd cut over and close off to the houses to the north. But I guess he was very disturbed that the fence permit was brought in and then he had to go to DSL, and now he's got to go to what do they call that, Army Corps of Engineers, when he's not even doing any excavation or any fill. And I believe that bothered him enough where he decided he wasn't going to do anything on his dime now about closing that area off unless the city wants to pay for it. And he's just going to close the whole thing off. And that's what he explained to me. on Monday. And I told him at that time that I hope there would be some way that we could work together and maybe possibly open up that east side field, because my kids played on it, and I know Matt Brown played on it, and I believe Paulina's son played on it. I mean, we've all had children in Gerhard, and they've all played. So anyway, as it was explained to me, he was just going to go ahead and fence the whole thing off because of liability. And hopefully we can meet again and maybe iron out some of the wrinkles in this relationship.
Well, I understand the concern about liability. That's legit. But if he was able to fence off the building area, which is where the primary issues lay, and if the city covered the playing field with its liability insurance coverage, then that mitigates his liability for what we want the public property for. So I'm not quite following what his issue was. And if a fence split the property along the parking lot or in the middle of the parking lot from Pacific Way to the other side of the housing development, then the Corps of Engineers and all that probably wouldn't be applicable because it's outside of the flood zone or
The wetlands on the east side.
wetlands. Yeah.
Right. Well, Brent, I think what you really should do is maybe call Bob up and have a walk around with him and have him explain his feelings, because I'm paraphrasing what he said to me. I just know that he was not happy with what happened, and because of that, he decided that if that's the way it's going to be, then this is the way he's going to do it. And
Okay.
The one sticking point that his lawyer identified was she wanted the city to lock and unlock the gates to the property. That was not, there was no obvious person to do that. Our police chief did not want to set the precedent of doing that. And I thought where we had left it is I said to her, you know, I don't know if there's a system where we could have a time lock or something like that, or what the possibilities are, but it doesn't seem like anyone's going to use the field in the very near term. So maybe we can button everything else up and get the permit, understanding we're going to revisit that issue, you know, at a later time. And my understanding was that's what was going to happen. I did not realize that there was an Army Corps of Engineers issue. That wasn't something that had come up when I was on the phone with her. So
well, DSL has told them that they have to get the Army Corps to sign off on it now too.
Carol,
Even though they're not doing any fill, it's just what DSL decided they needed to do. And honestly, you know, that was on Monday, and we had a very good meeting, I thought, and that's what he told me. And
Well, I'll reach out to him. Yeah, I felt like with at least 3 other city people doing a tour, I didn't need to tag along or be involved at this point. But maybe I'll do my own private tour.
Well,
and
that's
see
what
if
I
I can
did,
talk to him.
Brent. I thought it was already set up for you and Dan and for Paulina and Rita, and I was going, man, I got to get on this ship because it's going to float away and I'm not going to have any of this information. So I called up and asked for a Monday show, and I'm sure he'd be happy to walk you around and explain his feelings about what he wants to do and how he's proceeding with the fence and his need for what he wants the city to take care of. He doesn't want squatters, vagrants. They don't want to abandon campers on the property. And so I think it's more than just unlocking a gate and having liability insurance. It's policing the area to make sure you don't get a homeless shelter started up that you can't remove. There's all these other things that came into the conversation.
Okay. Hey, Dan, do you have any interest in doing a tour?
I would love to. I'm just right at the moment, my work schedule is not very conducive to anything during the day.
Okay.
But by all means, don't let me stop you from doing it. I am curious, is he blaming the city for the fact that he's having to go to these different agencies to get this permit
Can I
solidified? I mean, is that...
Carol,
background on this?
go ahead and please.
Yeah, it came in a flurry. The city halls closed quite a bit, as you know, with COVID. And then Chad normally approves fence permits, and he was gone. And it seemed like he was starting to put the fence up without any permission. And so the city, I put together a fence permit because there wasn't a form officially. Chad would look at the code, any city manager in the past, and just look at says you can go 6 feet high, no barbed wire, da-da-da-da-da. There's not much to it. But it needed a signature. It needed the city to sign off. I didn't know what was happening with the locking and unlocking agreement between he and the city. And it just felt like he was trying to rush it. So I knew there were wetlands there, and I called DSL, and there's not a good history. There's never been a specific wetland delineation on that property, but there is definitely quite a bit of wetland on the east side. And therefore, DSL is interested and would require a permit if you dug or excavated or filled more than 50 cubic yards. Okay, well, I didn't know how many posts he was going to have. It was a line drawn on an aerial with no dimensions, and I had no sense of what the details were. So I made him go back and at least tell us how much excavating he was doing, because maybe it'd be nothing. Maybe it'd be 5 cubic yards. And so that would settle it, and DSL wouldn't care. The DSL staff spent quite a bit of time looking into the history of the wetlands there, and it could potentially be a mitigation area for the development that occurred to the north. We don't know. And if it's a mitigation, you got to be careful with it. Okay, and where's the boundary? We don't know that because it's a general statewide inventory. It's not a site-specific delineation. And everybody gets nervous when you say you have to do that, but I didn't feel comfortable just letting it go. And so he went back and calculated with his excavation man how many cubic yards his fence was going to affect. And it turned out, well, he changed the design. That's when he shortened the fence and just put it across the front, because at the same time he was complaining about the cost of steel going up. And I think maybe it was too expensive to build a fence along the parking lot there in that direction that you were mentioning, north to south. He just shortened the whole project and pretty much put it across Pacific Way. And there was like 6 cubic yards of fill. So DSL said, well, we don't care then, even though one of the fence poles is in the wetland for sure. But she said you should check with Army Corps of Engineers because they might. And then he got upset, I think, because, we had to hurry up and get the thing and put it out in the rain or on the porch for him to pick up after hours. And it was the weekend, and it took over the weekend, which happened to be New Year's and holidays, to get it back to him. And there we are.
Oh, boy.
And so it just turned out to be a headache for him. He just wanted to put it up. Now, eventually, we did talk about just a temporary fence. Can't you avoid all of this and put a temporary fence without having to dig or excavate? And even his consultants thought that made a lot of sense, but he didn't want to do that. So we were back to the cubic yards, and that's as far as we've gotten. Does that help or make it worse?
Thank you for the
No,
explanation.
that helped.
Yeah.
And maybe it will comfort him to know the city of Gerhardt, I believe, had to go through DSL and Corps of Engineers for the Duncan Crossing Bridge project on the ridge path.
Right.
So
Yeah,
we're not exempt. We're not exempt either. So
No, and Paulina came in to save the day to get a signature because I couldn't do it. The timing was terrible. And so I think and same with Peter, he talked to the attorney, was saying, can't we get our fence permit? And we said, well, that's fine. Let's just sign it and give it to him. And we haven't talked to Corps of Engineers yet.
And I would just say that I did send an email to Mr. Mori a week or two ago and did suggest a time lock device on the gates, knowing that the chief of police is not interested at this time in going on private property to lock and unlock
Yeah.
gates. I'm ready to move on. We have no new business, but after that we have our visitor feedback section, and I'm going to be mindful of the time. It's 8:32. If we're not done by 9 o'clock, we're going to take a break. So I'm just going to go through the people I see on my screen. And if I call your name and you'd like to speak for 3 minutes, then just unmute and go ahead. The first one I see is Darcy.
Thank you, Paulina. I have nothing to add.
Thank you. And Tom Thies.
Nothing to add.
RJ, I'm going to skip over you. BB.
Yes, as a citizen here in Gerhardt, I live at 661 10th Street. With this issue at the school, I kind of am in agreement with Brent that I would really like to see, especially since he is intending ultimately to give the city that eastern field piece. I'd really hate to see that that's fenced off for any period of time because people do use that. And it's also an area where elk move through. I really hate to see the elk have to divert and be more involved with Highway 101 than to be able to use that area the way they have. And I know there's all these issues with the fence permits and all that, but if there would be some way to still leave that accessible for public use, I think that would be ultimately the best resolution for what's good for the community and hopefully satisfy the owner as well. That's my only input. Thank you.
Chris Bell.
I would just like to thank the city of Gerhart for the great commitment and follow through for Toys for Tots, that the city hall put out a box to collect, and the Seaside Rotary Club did collect, and we provided 2 filled boxes of toys. 324 families were served with toys in Seaside and Gerhart, and it was a first time for us in the city to provide a box, and we did a great job, and I really thank the city's commitment to collect the toys and bring them in at night, and for Mr. Baker to make sure that they were distributed.
And Chris, just for the record, can you give us your address, please?
Oh, sorry. It's Post Office 2833, Gerhart.
Thank you. And I just have to say I'm remiss in probably not thanking Chris enough for her work on that project. This was her idea, and it really seemed like it was a great success. I know we got to do some local shopping to put some of those toys in, and so it helped some of the businesses and it helped some of our local kids. So it was really a great project. Kathy Zimmerman is the next. Okay, and the next name is Cheryl, and I don't know if that's our Cheryl Lund as a staff person or a different Cheryl. Go ahead. Cheryl?
I'm thinking that Cheryl Lund, because of the C1 zone record.
Okay. She's unmuted, but I'm not hearing anything.
Is that Cheryl Lund? Huh.
Okay, so those are our visitors, and that would be our second segment for visitor feedback. So I'm going to move on to council concerns. Brent, go ahead.
I have no concerns at this time. Thanks.
Carrie?
My only concern is to remind everybody to please wear your mask, wash your hands, and keep away from everybody. This variant that's coming in, the first 6 variants take 100 molecules to infect you. This fast moving, highly contagious one takes 5 molecules of COVID to infect you. That's why it has a 40 to 70% rate of infection. So please stay away from everyone you can. Wear that mask and wash those hands.
And stay home if you're ill.
Excuse me, can you hear me?
Oh.
My wife has been trying to talk and you blocked her out. Her name is Cheryl Newman. We're at 258 Kershaw Circle, and she would like to get her time and speak.
Go ahead.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I'm Cheryl Newman. Somehow I wasn't getting through, even though my microphone was unmuted. But we live at 258 Kershaw Circle, and we back up to the school property. And I have some concerns about the east side being left open. I'm not sure that if there's a gate in front or a fence in front on the Pacific Way side, if you're going to have people wanting to use that property, that part of the property for fields, ball fields, you're going to have somebody come in and mow it, right? And how are they going to get through if there's a fence there? So what's the point unless it's maintained? But it can't be maintained if there's a fence there. So can somebody tell me how that can happen?
The city isn't going to be involved.
Right. So
Right, it's going to be closed off to the public entirely. It's all going to be for the Scofie enterprises. They'll maintain it if they want to, or just do what they want. That
well, you talked about him wanting to deed it to the city eventually.
well, that's years in advance.
Okay. So essentially the whole place will be unusable for 2 to 3 years. Is that the idea then?
You would have to ask Bob. It's private property, and the city
I
has
know.
nothing to do with it.
Right. Does the city want to have anything to do with it?
I do.
I do. Does anybody else? I mean, what I'm hearing is people have talked to this guy, but they're hearing different things, saying different things. Wouldn't it be better for the city to get together and decide this is what we'd like to do with this and talk to him about it and get a plan instead of this person going to talk to him or that person going to talk to him? It just seems so haphazard. And it's just a wonderful property to be able to use for a park. I just think it's just been, wiped under the table, and it's just going to sit there with a fence around it for 2 to 3 years until something is done. So wouldn't it be better to have the whole city together decide this is what we'd like to do? What do you think about this, Mr. Morey? And have some sort of plan before he gets his big plan to do things with the school property itself, the buildings? I mean, do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes, Cheryl, I think we understand, and we're coming up with a plan. We have a Parks Commission group working right now to develop a plan long-term for the park needs of Gerhardt. And this property may be incorporated into that overall master plan, but they haven't come up with a plan yet.
And when will that happen conceivably? Will it be a matter of months, year? Do we have any timeline that might be completed?
The parks
Yes.
plan will be done in about a year.
A year. Okay.
West side fence.
Okay. Well, it sounds like we're getting some interesting opinions and discussions with different people with him, and nothing's really decided. So I guess I'm just really disappointed in the city's response to this property, and getting some good communication, consistent communication with this guy. We're concerned, of course, because we're right next to the school property. We'd like to know what's going on there. We're also concerned, which I've mentioned before in meetings, about getting some sort of playground area in the city. And I realize the Parks group is trying to get that done, but that's yet another year down the road. And who knows what'll be done with this property in the meantime. So I guess, you always want the process to go faster and faster. But honestly, I think the sooner the better, or at least try to get a good working relationship with this guy and everybody on the same page.
Get some neighbors involved.
Maybe get some neighbors involved too with it. I don't know if there are any neighbors on this Parks Committee. Are there, Brent? I guess you were the one who was mentioning about it.
I know that there's about 10 people on it.
Okay.
I don't know where every one of them lives.
And right now, the committee is getting the survey out, and the survey will be out until March 1st, where we're asking all the residents of Gerhardt to respond and tell us what they like about our parks, what they think we need for parks, what they don't like. Are they interested in paying more money for park services? And those kind of questions. And then we'll tabulate those sometime in the spring and come up with a plan where the committee's very diligent and they're spending a lot of volunteer time, actually moving pretty fast. I think it'll be finished in early fall.
That'd be wonderful.
Yeah, it'll go before hearings to the Planning Commission and Council, and there will be lots of time for public input.
Okay, okay.
And Cheryl, have you given your input on that survey already?
Yes, I have.
The day it came
We
out.
sent it in the day it came out. So yes, we have.
Fantastic.
Yeah,
Good.
we're happy to do that. But we're just real concerned about, whether this eyesore of a fence is going to be up for years. So just putting my 2 cents in. But thank you for your consideration. And I just hope it'll be sooner than later. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Cheryl. And I would just add, Cheryl made a comment about mowing and such. And when we started this process, and there have been a number of conversations, we did think that the Public Works group would do the mowing on that site. And that currently is not in the plan at this moment. But the city has been open to doing some of that if agreement can be reached. But Mr. Maury mentioned to me today when we were walking around that there is a volunteer from the adjacent neighborhood who has volunteered to do some mowing of the fields, the ball fields. So I would just leave it at that.
And if I could say something else to Cheryl, there is no signed commitment about deeding that property to the city. It is mentioned in conversation only, so it's certainly not written in stone. So please don't take it to the bank.
Oh, no, I wouldn't do that. But if the, Parks group is considering that, it would be nice to let him know that that might be a good consideration, and coming from the city council as well as the Parks group. I guess I just like the city to be more forceful about what their wants are and what they would envision maybe that area to be, and kind of decide as a group what they want.
I'd like, can I jump in? This is her husband, Richard, and I just got a question. I know there's codes that the city has for mowing of vacant lots. And if this is going to be a property that is going to be fenced off, and I'm not just talking about where the ball field is, I'm talking about the entire lot to the west side that goes up the hill. If no one takes care of that, it's going to be a fire hazard. Is anybody from the city has talked to him about the possibility of making sure this gets mowed and taken care of? Because my property lies next to this, and if it becomes a fire hazard and that property gets started on fire, comes to my house, then you got a problem.
Well, he did point out the property line to me on the west side, and to the northwest side, the school property is pretty much up at the top of the hill. And there are some pink markers you can take a look at. So those would be his responsibility to maintain. I don't know how much
Question. Miss,
Could I say something, Mayor?
There's a question. I know where the line is because there's a stake right on my property line going up next to a big pine tree. And if you run that line straight down, there's a 3 to 4 foot gap between fences that align the top of the houses on the top, and where if he puts a fence in, you're going to have an open fence line. That used to be the walkway for the tsunami zone in which the children could leave. So now we're going to have an area that's going to be growth. And how anybody going to get in there to take care of that, to weed it out? I've weeded my section out to make sure that it's taken care of. Others have taken care of some stuff. But if we put a fence line up there and he puts a steel fence up, there's a problem. Also, it's going to leave a path now. If people want to run behind it to get through the Pacific Way, he's opened up another path now that people are going to cut through my property to cut through a 3-foot section between two areas of fence that are going to be open to the public. Have we considered that as a problem?
We've got a time limit here now.
Right.
Thank you.
Peter?
So we didn't publicly notice that we would be discussing, there's a mention of the school and it's the school update. So the council can't come to a decision this evening. We will have to schedule that and another. What I can tell you is that I have had conversations with his attorney, a number of them, like quite a few. And we've made it abundantly clear that the city is interested in there being some public access to the playing fields. We view that as an amenity. I've been clear with his lawyer that as far as mowing, that is something that, the city is willing to take on, perhaps as part of that access. We need to know what that would look like. And we've let them know that the issue of whether we can do time gates or another gate system, finding someone who will lock and unlock the gates, because during the summer, they'd probably be open past the time when regular city employees are on the clock. That's something that we'd need to resolve. So where we left it off was she was going to have conversations with him, and we were going to see if we could work, get a working understanding of these issues. As far as the fence goes, he can get that fence as long as the fence is within our code fence language. He is allowed that fence by right. Now, whether or not the Army Corps of Engineers is going to want to take a look at it, I have no idea. They might. DLCD staff, I guess, think so. But ultimately, he gets to do, it's his private property, even though people still think of it as a school. Anything that we're able to do there would be him granting an access easement for a limited purpose. So I can understand why you're concerned about a number of things, including the aesthetics of the fence, as well as whether people might travel across other private property. If, what I hear you saying is you want the city to take some sort of preemptive enforcement action. And I think part of what I'm hearing people say is we need better lines of communication with the property owner and to rebuild that more trusting relationship so he understands what the city's desires are, and that is difficult to do if we're in the middle of enforcing on an issue that has not yet occurred. So if things begin to happen on the property that are in violation of the city's code, at that point, there are steps that can be taken through code enforcement. But if there aren't any issues that are happening with the property, then there's really nothing we can do on a preemptive basis. And to threaten action would probably further impair our relationship with the property owner.
Right, and I agree that you really need a good relationship with him to get something going, but it would be nice if there were a bunch of people that could meet with him at the same time, so we're not getting information from this person or that person and telling what he said to this person or that person. It seems to be a little sporadic, so.
Right.
And I know you, go ahead.
It can't happen is because anytime we have more than 2 members of the council meeting with him, we would have a quorum of the city council and it would be a public meeting. So we would have to publicly notice it, and we would have to schedule a regular public meeting, and that might not be a bad idea. I mean, I could easily see how council and perhaps members of the community, if they were invited by the property owner, could, that sort of whether we call it a meeting or a work session, might be able to occur, but it can't occur right now. So it's actually a good idea. It seems counterintuitive that it's a good idea for the counselors to walk it one at a time, but in order to comply with our public meeting rules, it actually is a really good idea to not have more than 2 people with him, because if there are more than 2 people and businesses discussed, and this is one of those instances where, you know, anything he said, someone could say, well, that's business that'll be in front of the council, then we do have that public meeting violation problem that we work really hard to avoid.
Well,
So
I understand that.
understand your frustration, and I understand how this would look inefficient, but the inefficiency is happening in part because it must occur that way.
Well, and you're talking about not having a meeting because of COVID, and I understand that. Is that correct? Not having a city council meeting with people that from the community. I realize it would have to be a Zoom meeting. It could not be in-person meeting at this point with COVID.
Yeah, we can't, because of the limitations on the occupancy at City Hall, and also the governor's most recent orders related to there actually isn't a public meetings. Our public meeting is somewhere between her definition of a social gathering and a funeral, which I know it sounds like that's a joke, but I'm not making a joke.
I know.
But yeah, there are some extreme limitations on how many people we can put in, particularly inside a room.
Well, that would be nice. And if we get to the point where we can all get vaccinated, then we can have these meetings. So I think that would be something to think about. I appreciate you taking the time. I realize I've kind of gone over my time, but it's a concern of ours. And thank you so much for listening. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Cheryl.
You're welcome, Cheryl.
Okay, it's 9:03. Counselors' concerns. Carrie, did you get a chance to do council concerns?
I have,
I'm a little
I did my council concern. I said, wear your mask, wash your hands, stay away. So,
And Dan,
Yes,
I just want to make
very
sure.
valid concerns.
And Rita, you're okay?
Yeah, can you tell us when Chad will return to work?
Chad will be back 2 weeks from yesterday.
All right, thank you.
And Dan, did you get a chance to do council concerns? Sorry.
I have nothing, thank you.
All right. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I make a motion, we adjourn.
Is there a second to that?
I'll second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed? Motion passed. Thank you all for sticking it out for 2 hours.
Happy New Year,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Bye.
Happy New Year.
Bye-bye. Happy New Year.